couple things that we have discussed in passing, and then kind of some other ideas that have come up in conversation with the staff. So first of all, one of the things we talked about at the last meeting was how to do history a little differently, a little better. And the information has gone back and forth. One of the things that Dr. Kopkis and I talked about after the governance council meeting was an online course called the Big History Project. And this was a course that basically, and Dr. Kopkis can explain it better than I can, that basically kind of marries science, some math, philosophy into history. It starts with the Big Bang Theory. A lot of it's online. A lot of it is technology-based. So I talked to the district people about it, and they had said that there was a school in Cobb County that did it. The results were not favorable. They felt that, the Cobb County school felt that it was not rigorous enough, that it was a good addition to a world history course, but probably they felt that standing alone, they probably was not that strong. So we're still talking about that. We're still talking about possibly applying for an RFF so that if a student took a specific world studies course, it could count in place of the world history credit. And that includes maybe African studies, something like that. So they wouldn't have to take a whole world history, they could still get that credit. And then some other things that we have talked about, one of the things that also came up was PE, and what some other schools have done, and Opie talked to Coach McCoy about this, I did not. One of the things some other schools have done is if you're a varsity letter sport athlete, or you're enrolled in weight training, that you can exempt the personal fitness part. So you just take health, but you wouldn't have to take personal fitness. Coach McCoy was not a fan of that, and in talking to some other schools, there's been some logistical challenges. For example, what does being a letter athlete mean? Because it means different things in different sports. Who keeps track of that? What happens if a kid tries out for a sport but then gets cut or gets dropped? Do they put them back in personal fitness? So some of the other schools that have done it, at one school exempted marching band, which I'm a little uncomfortable with. So some of the other schools that did it really ran into some logistical errors. They're making it work, but it's been a whole lot of effort. And Crystal, maybe you know something about that too, at the district level.
In terms of
with the personal fitness and exempting it, and how it's been, I guess, for some schools, a real logistical challenge.
Well, what I have heard up to this point is that two factors are kind of questionable, or we're working through how to sort them out. One, when you get a transfer from someone, and two, when you transfer out and you're going into another school, how does your credit transfer work, and how does that school, do you have to repeat anything or make anything up? So for schools that are just now, this would be the implementation phase for any schools that got approved for an RFF. This would be the time that they'd be kind of thinking through what some of those implications may be. I'm not sure if I've heard any cases that have happened yet. Those are the two kind of implications that they're kind of thinking through.
Mm-hmm. A couple of other things that would take a waiver is we talked about, we have a large number of kids who are math support, which is not uncommon. But we talked about possibly doing a course before advanced algebra. So for those kids who really have low math skills, we used to do something like that in the state called integrated math or different things. But that by and large has went away. And you talked to Lindsay, so I'll let you talk about that a little bit.
So this is probably one of the more viable ones that we would want to explore for now, and it might not end up panning out for this approval season, if you will, but the idea is this, and we used to do, I think, something similar at Riverwood when we were on a block schedule, but the idea is to provide some math classes or a math sequence for students who are significantly below level. And that is a reality at Riverwood. I mean, we have, if you're familiar over at Ridgeview, they do the STAR testing, and it indicates to us which students potentially need various levels of intervention in both math or English and reading. And we've got a big crop of kids who are very, very low in both subjects. And we have some support right now. So they're all pretty high-level math courses that involve, and I couldn't probably tell you exactly, but high levels of calculus operations.
And high-stakes tests attached to it.
Correct. And based on this past year, we have a new teacher teaching AP Calculus, and she's very data-driven. And everything that she has been able to show us indicates that there are a lot of kids who end up in AP Calculus, specifically, who are not ready to take that course. They're coming out of pre-calculus not ready to jump into that much. But they don't have any other options. And it puts a lot of seniors, a crop, I shouldn't say a lot, it puts a crop of seniors in danger of not graduating from high school because they're on the cusp of passing or not passing AP Calculus. And that's not okay. I mean,
Right.
from my position, it's not okay to have a course that exists out there in the state. And I understand, and fully respect the county decision to say we want to be able to push more kids into higher level classes. I get that. And I think as a school, we've demonstrated that we believe it. Here's our IB coordinator right here. We believe in the idea of pushing kids into classes when appropriate. We've got kids for whom that's not appropriate though, and we need another option. So we want to see if we can get calculus.
So one of the arguments is, if AP is simply a college level class taught at high school, if they're college bound, put them in AP. And the same argument is made for AP US History, and the same argument is made for all these other courses. But in math, talking about if a kid wants to take that fourth math, if they really want it on their transcript, not everybody is an AP kid. Not everybody is ready for that much rigor. And then the other thing is, the kid who's taking AP Calc, and maybe these two young ladies can talk about it, they're also taking AP this and AP that and IB this and IB that. So should we just pile on another AP course without giving them an option to say you can still take calculus, just not with the high stakes test attached to it, not with the rigor? It's still going to be rigorous, but not at an AP level.
I think the point there is a lot of these kids are college bound,
Yeah.
but they're not going to be college bound in high level math classes.
Right.
I mean, I took a class called
Right.
Math for Educators.
It's a history of math.
So
It's the truth.
not all of us need to take AP Calculus in order to be
Right.
recognized as a bona fide college bound student.
Right.
I couldn't have done it. In fact, I didn't. I never took anything beyond trig.
Nope.
And I'm doing just fine.
Do you guys have any thoughts? I mean, you live the math
Absolutely.
world.
Yeah, I think this is very true. I was actually in AP Calc for about 2 or 3 days, and I just realized that exactly what you're saying. I was taking, I think, 3 other AP classes, 3, and it was going to be too much for me, and so I switched to AP Stat, which I found out is very hard as well, but I think that if there's another calculus option, that would be very beneficial to a very large amount of students.
Exactly what Maddie just said. There are a lot of people who, yes, have a lot of other AP IB courses. And also what Dr. Shaw mentioned, I know at least some of the people in my calc class are struggling a little bit with the material because it's AP. We have to do so much more and go so much deeper. So they're ready for calc, just maybe not necessarily the rigor of the AP course.
And from your experience, having been in the Math SL class last year, which does a teensy-weensy bit of calc,
Yeah.
there's too much other stuff. I guess I'm trying to figure out, does the Math SL class, that doesn't sound like a good fit. I'm confirming that, but before I confirm that, I want
To go
You're
from
a student
pre-calc
course.
to Math SL?
to, yeah.
That seemed like, at least for me, and I know a lot of the people who were in SL after calc, that seemed like a fairly natural progression. Because we do other stuff in SL, but we also do a fair amount of calculus. And what we're doing in AP Calc now, we covered last year in SL. Less quickly and sort of it was in with other stuff, but the SL doesn't go quite as in depth as AP Calc, obviously, and it didn't move as quickly with some of the stuff that we're working on in Calc now. So yeah, pre-calc to SL seemed to work.
So what sort of sold it for me, and as I mentioned, I took Math for Educators, so my math knowledge is limited. But this is coming from Mrs. Borman, who teaches all of these courses minus AP. So she is the IB math teacher right now, and her feeling, and I tend to respect it, is that there's not always a correct place for these kids to go after, and it really is just some of them. Some of them still do need to be pushed, I think, into those upper level classes.
So, Crystal, I guess on the interest form, and I guess the governance council has to agree what interest forms you want to submit, is that correct?
They don't need to vote on it.
Okay.
Agreeing it or discussing it is important, but the vote doesn't happen until you get your feedback back and you decide to put it up for public comment. So this wouldn't, going forward or moving forward with these interest forms doesn't require another meeting, is what I'm saying. You can share the content online and your community will see it when you post it for public comment, and there'll be an opportunity to revise or change or even decide not to submit after public comment. But for the interest forms, which is just that one-page snapshot, no vote is required.
And how
Just
detailed,
discussion
I'm sorry,
about
how
it.
detailed does it have to be? Because obviously these are still half-baked a little bit. I mean, they're not, we don't have all the
So,
details.
This is Crystal's push, which is if they're half-baked now, we need to get them as baked as possible, as soon as possible. So this is how this process is gonna work. We need to turn the oven up, so we can bake. So, this is how this new process is gonna work. The CSAT reviews interest forms, really depending on the amount of interest forms they receive. I don't want my schools being stuck in a big pile of interest forms, which means the sooner we get it in, the better. There are 2 deadlines, but they're not due dates. So the first one passed, but that doesn't mean if you had an interest form that was fully baked next week that you can't submit it to Dr. LaCava, your area superintendent. He reviews it. This is the way it works. He reviews it, he looks at it, he might call Dr. Shaw or ask some questions about where this is coming from. You have a very data-driven area superintendent. So I like the fact that your math teachers bring in data to substantiate these requests, because that's something he will automatically, I know he will want to ask. Once he sees this makes sense, I can support this and I will fight for this if necessary. Now he's going to ask questions to help him get more information about that. He's going to forward it to cabinet, which means it goes to Dr. Neary. And then everyone looks at it, that's on cabinet. And then at the same time, it's also going to CSAC, which is the department heads. So Amy Barger is there from Learning and Teaching, the nutrition department is there, the transportation department is there. Everybody's looking at implications together, and those things kind of happen simultaneously. But they're not happening in a vacuum. We're constantly getting this ongoing kind of rolling in of interest forms. That's why I don't want to rush an idea like this. You want to get it as fleshed out as possible so you get the right amount of feedback. But I would like for our schools to get their interest forms in as soon as possible so that they can get their feedback back and craft a really strong proposal to show their community. And a lot of people will know this is what Riverwood wants to do. They've got information that leads them to believe that this is right for them, and you want to get that message out to your community and to the district too. So if they have questions, they're going to say, well, this makes sense, but what about this? You want to hear that now, not when your RFF is up for public comment. So I would say I heard about the 2 math. I have notes. Not heard about, I'm sorry. I can't see my notes. I understand your 2, the course waiver for slowing down coordinate algebra and offering it across 2 years and perhaps making it integrated so that students are receiving credit for it and not just having to take math support. And I hear the regular calculus versus AP with content that's more accessible, and so that students don't have to take a full, or compromise their graduation. I don't understand the world history interest form idea on the same level as the math ones that you guys discussed. If that's something that you guys want to move forward with, I'd like to hear more about it and see an interest form come through for that as well. There's no guarantee that there'll be waivers for any of these, but I think that the CSAT should look at it.
I'd like to ask something about a temporary waiver. And I mentioned this to Mr. Blackwell and Dr. Shaw very informally, but we currently have the waiver in place for the IB chemistry to be exempt from the physical science or physics requirement. We're going to be making some changes to the science program, but it's mostly going to have an effect on the current crop of 9th graders. we're gonna have some 10th graders who are gonna be applying to the IB program. One of the options that we're gonna have available for them is biology. But we want that to be also a 2-year track. So what I'm asking is it worth it for 1 year to write a waiver to say, all right, also we're gonna have those folks doing biology for 2 years to be exempt from the same physics and physical science requirement. The rationale's the same, all of the rest of it's the same, it's just adding IB biology to that, or does that?
And why doesn't the current waiver cover biology already? Because my understanding of the waiver is that it's a waiver of the definition of physical science. In other words, is biology not covered by that?
Maybe I should go back and.
No, I can look into it as well to see.
Yeah,
what-
maybe, because my impression was that it was first written with chemistry.
But we may not have,
We might have not put that in the new.
we may not have put that in there. It was
No,
written
you
with those
didn't.
students in mind, but we may not have put only for IB chemistry.
Great.
No, and the
We have to
reason,
read it,
that's why
though.
I'm asking, I remember it, and the waiver is to waive the definition of physical science. It's not for any one particular.
Okay, so
I
we would be
believe we're
covered then for that crop.
We may
of
have put
potential
diploma
10th graders.
students, so.
Okay.
The waiver
That-
does refer to Ivy track diploma students.
Okay, so we might be good, okay,
Okay.
great.
But if not, we would need to make an
If
addendum.
not, make an addendum.
Can you make an
to
addendum
to that?
Cover
Possible?
yourself. It shouldn't be a difficult, I mean, what you would do is resubmit and say, now we're including these. It shouldn't be difficult to obtain because this is something you already have in place. You want to make
Mhm.
sure you're covering the students that it applies to.
But the word resubmit makes me a little nervous in that they might say, well, no, we don't want to do this.
I
Yeah.
don't foresee that happening with something that they've already given you approval for in other areas. Now, I can't speak on behalf, we're talking about Dr. Rossi, who's the person who ultimately approves. But whether or not you think something is gonna go through, or it makes you nervous, shouldn't hold you back from submitting.
Well, it very much would, because it would put a whole group of IB diploma candidates at risk.
So then your
And that would-
rationale needs to be strong enough so that it would. And why would they take away, the other piece is, why would they take away the waiver from the children that already, or the students that already have it, just because
Well, I
they're
guess
asking
part of my
for-
thought is that, well, we're doing it for this, what's wrong with the way things are set up, which we're gonna be fixing,
Yeah,
but
that's not
there's
the way
this
the
group of
RFF
10th graders.
process works. They wouldn't say, that doesn't make sense, so we're gonna take your whole waiver and snatch it. Unless it's something like you're doing full release days and a percentage of your staff is like getting their doctor's appointments or not showing up on those days. In those
So it's
cases.
being abused.
Yeah, if it's being misused, or like you have early release days and a disproportionate amount of your students are absent on that day.
Mhm.
If the district sees data like that, they're gonna say, hey, I don't know if this waiver is being used properly. But this is not a waiver that falls into that category.
all right.
It's one
But
to
we
help
do
kids.
need to first look at the language of.
See how it's worded.
Yeah.
So I guess for us, and I know everybody's got a lot to do, I mean, we can, and I think this is how it works, if the governance council's in agreement, we as the admin can go ahead and start cobbling together these interest forms. You're right, the world history one is still a little bit nebulous, because that keeps changing. I think it's a safe consensus to say that the teachers have some concerns about that course because of how much information is covered, the pace at which it moves. So that one, I think we'd have to do a little more work, but I feel pretty good that we're ready to move forward with the pre-algebra and the calculus if we want to, if the group's
I
in
mean, I
agreement.
feel like I understand those,
Yeah.
even just from sitting here.
Okay. And then is there anything maybe?
So you guys can do the interest forms and forward them in?
So,
Because we don't-
Crystal, should we write it and then send it to the members to review?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let me look, I'm looking at
But we
my
don't have to
calendar.
vote on it.
You don't have to vote on it, but it's important to know,
Okay.
you know, what's being submitted. You're gonna get feedback that you'll get to synthesize together anyway. We are at, if you don't count this week, 1, 2, 2.5 weeks till the last date that you could submit an interest form. I don't wanna rush Anybody?
No, we want to get it to them.
But I would love, like, I would try to do a cartwheel 7 months pregnant if you guys could submit in the next week. Before that huge influx. Nobody laughed at my pregnant joke. I'm trying to do a
It was
cartwheel.
internal, I didn't
I'd like to see it.
Me too.
It's a small room, Crystal, I don't know where you're.
Yeah, I was thinking on the grass, you know, we're in a high school. No big deal. But before that huge influx happens, I would like to see you guys go ahead so that, you know, I know they're gonna put time into every
Sure.
RFF interest form that they get, but I'd like for this to be one of the first. Particularly because of the rationale you guys have discussed, that this is something that kids that are already doing well are struggling with, and this could be a way to get them to focus on personally, part of going to college and what I enjoyed about it was being able to choose what I learned about and focus on what I like. And part of the reason I didn't do as good in high school as I did in college is because I didn't have that choice. And being able to offer that, I think, is part of a really strong rationale for doing what works for kids versus what makes sense for adults.
Yep.
I guess from governance council members, are there any other waivers that we had talked about that maybe we didn't bring up, or anything else that you guys want us to look at?
Not that I'm aware of. Okay.
Okay. So I guess what I'm hearing then is probably we need to still flush out that world history idea a little bit and really come up with something more concrete. We can email you guys. And then certainly get to work on those other interest forms in the math area. Lindsay probably help write them.
They're one-pagers. If you need the template, I can send it.
Is it on the portal?
It's on the portal, it's on the
Okay.
website. I'll send it to you, whatever you
Portal.
need. And I
I can
believe
find it.
Central has some that are interready.
I
if
can
you want
send it to you, I know where it is.
No, we'll
lost in
we'll
the
figure it
portal.
out.
All right.
I'm sending it to both of you.
Thank you, man.
Okay, thank you.
Was there anything else that anybody wants to discuss, girls? Anything?
I don't think so.
Then I make the motion that this meeting is, oh, do,
Do you guys have public comment
I
at this meeting?
I don't know.
didn't.
If you
Because it's
didn't,
a-
then
Okay,
it's
okay.
just a.
Then I make a motion that this meeting is adjourned. And I'll, get the video and do the minutes.